Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm going to start a new series, What If Deku Was the Sin of Pride? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
According to the young man who was currently chained to the floor with multiple quirk suppressants, looking back, it's true that you never appreciate what you have till it's torn away, he laughed. Despite his position, he had a smile that never went away. He was a young man with curly, long green hair that hung around his head like a mane. He was also slightly well built. That smile shouted strength and overconfidence to the detective on the other side of him. It seemed to him that the boy still thought he was in charge. Grumbled Sukauchi. Mr. Pride, we both know why you're here, and this is your one chance. Tell me your story. Give me a reason why I shouldn't have you locked away in the bowels of Tartarus for the rest of your life. The kid leaned back and said, Sure. I'll tell you a story, but it won't just be mine. In order to understand, you need the whole picture, and my sin is only one piece of that puzzle. Let's start at the beginning, with two friends closer than brothers. While their mothers conversed and observed them, two 4-year-old boys were playing together in the small play area of their doctor's office. One was a young child with fiery red eyes and ash blonde hair, while the other had 4 diamond-shaped freckles on each cheek and short green curls. Shortly after, a woman called for Katsuki Bakugo, causing the blonde boy and his mother to get up and follow her to the examination room. When the woman came back a few minutes later and called for Izuku Midoriya, young Izuku took his mother Inko's hand and went inside. The doctor was an elderly man with a bushy gray mustache and goggles. The doctor gave them his diagnosis after a series of tests. Izuku could see the anguish in his mother's eyes when he presented his findings, but he wouldn't be among the dwindling 20% of people who had to face the world without a quirk. Izuku's telekinetic and pyrokinetic quirks were a combination of his parents' traits, and the doctor noted that the boy appeared to be able to absorb heat and light to fuel his quirk. Izuku smiled brightly at his mother when asked what it was called, saying, My mom says I'm the light of her life, so I'll call it sunshine. That way when I become a hero, I can be their light too. Inko began to cry and cradled her infant son. Later, she would confess to Misuki, Katsuki's mother and best friend, that she had detested Izuku's peculiarity when she first learned about it. It brought back memories of her ex-husband's fire breath quirk and the suffering he inflicted upon them when he abandoned them, but that was before he ever smiled at her. Allowing Hisashi to ruin Izuku's warmth was only giving him authority and recognition that he didn't deserve because Izuku would never grow up to be a man like him. The doctor assisted Izuku in using his quirk for the first time over the course of the following few minutes, and it was lovely. The two boys were taken to a park close to their homes after their appointments were over and their mothers had completed adulting, which includes paperwork and follow-up appointments. They were eager to share their peculiarities with each other. Izuku produced a tiny golden flame, and Katsuki produced tiny popping explosions in his outstretched hand that resembled firecrackers. When they made contact, the two gave each other a high five and caused a stinging explosion, but it wasn't too bad, and they both laughed as they reiterated their pledge to one another that they would work together to become the greatest heroes in the world. Pride exhaled. That was a good day for us, but not for Sloth. The day Sloth's quirk was diagnosed was the day he was abandoned. He was the first to end up in that hellhole they called an orphanage, but he wouldn't be alone for long. Even though Sukauchi was cuffed to the table like a rabid animal, a blonde with red eyes and an angry expression was glaring at him during his own interrogation in a different room. I don't know why you fucking want to hear about this, but, snarled the teen. The two, who are now 6 years old, were eating lunch at a cafe with Katsuki's father and their mothers. A person exploded through a wall across the street on a peaceful spring afternoon. Unaware of the danger, the two boys' eyes glowed as they watched All Might, the greatest hero, battle a villain across the street. However, a wave of pressure hit them as the two men's fists collided. I don't know which of those fucks did it, but all I remember was chaos. Fucking buildings falling apart around us, it was horrible. I never saw my parents or Auntie Inko again, the blonde said, averting her gaze. Got fucking knocked out when some concrete hit me in the head, but Pride told me what happened after that, Wrath said, shifting his hair to expose a scar. Pride's grin faded. When the smoke settled, I was scared and alone. All I could do was do my best to not get blown away as All Might and the villain in the suit did their best to try to kill each other. It seemed to go on forever until they both finally scored a devastating hit. I'll never forget watching All Might's side being torn apart or the sound of shattering bone as the top of the villain's head just splattered. There was blood everywhere. I remember the villain falling backwards into a smoky purple portal that must have been Kurogiri, but that's not what I was focused on at the time. When I saw All Might fall to his knees as he bled out, I knew I had to do something. I rushed over to him, and I knew I had to stop the bleeding. My mother was a nurse, so I did the only thing I could think of. I used my fire to sear the wound closed. Nodded. I remember the paramedics and recover girl saying that your quick action was reckless, but you saved his life. You have my thanks for that along with all of Japan's. Pride sighed. It was impulsive and I could have just as easily killed him or caused further complications, but that doesn't matter, because that's not what ended up happening. The pain did cause him to throw up blood in my face though, and that's probably when it happened. I remember him getting this weird serene look in his eyes before he passed out, and afterwards I did my best to try to scream for help. Once it was clear we had nowhere to go, Cammy forbid my sperm donor leave an up-to-date way to reach him in America. Wrath and I found ourselves at old lady Tanaka's orphanage just like Sloth after that. The detective sighed. Uraraka, as a brown-haired girl with pink cheeks and a thin scar over her left eye glared at Tsukauchi in another room. My name is Greed. The girl snarled. All right, Greed, your boyfriend told us about what happened to you, but we want to hear it from you. Tsukauchi sighed again. Greed grumbled. My parents ran a construction business. It was small, but they managed to snap up the contract for the Vespin City reconstruction, or at least a part of it. They were so excited. Things were tough with my older sister going to school to become a hero, but we were so proud of her. She was my idol. A part of me still looks up to her. Greed cleared her throat and sniffled. Anyway, about 3 months into the job, our company got fired. One of our business partners screwed us over, and sold us out to a competitor for a kickback. We lost everything. The house, our equipment, the bank took it all, and in the end I lost my parents too. I don't blame Anon. She was in her second year of high school. She couldn't care for me. Laughed. I'm just happy Nezu let her stay with some last-minute scholarship thing, or she might never have become the hero she is today. Could have done without Tanaka though. A young man with purple hair and dark eye bags laughed at Tsukauchi as he played with his suppressant bracelets. I remember when each of my family came to Tanaka's orphanage, the benefits of shitty parents I guess. It might be hard to believe but Wrath has always been a loud angry dog like he is now. Pride's changed a lot though. Because of my quirk, I got pushed around a lot, but Pride never stood for that. I helped him learn how to survive, and he protected me from the bullies. Wrath helped too, once he recovered from his loss, and Greed helped when she got there. I'll never understand what she sees in him, but Greed helped Wrath heal in ways Pride and I couldn't. Guess it's no surprise they started dating eventually. They deserved to find someone to care about them. Cammy knows Tanaka only cared about her checks for running that crap shack. That aside, what happened next? Tsukauchi asked, nodding. A blond boy with periwinkle eyes exaggeratedly said, where to even begin describing that horror show? Gluttony Neeson, would you like to explain? Sure Envy. So I was 6 when Envy and my quirks activated for the first time. Birthers didn't much like that. Not that I blame them, much. Finding your children drinking the neighbor's cat's blood must have been quite the shock, but in our defense, I was thirsty and Envy accidentally copied my quirk, so, the blonde girl next to him smirked and began to cry. Envy wrapped his arms around his sister. Gluttony. Don't defend those assholes. They beat you over that stupid flea bag. Those people were monsters, and never our family. We have a real family now, with Pride and the others, so try to remember that. Anyway, from then on they beat us any time we didn't meet their standards, mostly me, but we lucked out. They got called away by work, and while they were away, Envy freed me from the closet they locked me in. We packed what we could and we ran. Managed to live on the streets for a year before we were caught and forced to that decrepit dump. Gluttony sniffed and gave her brother a fanged grin. Envy murmured, that woman had no patience, but at least she couldn't beat us, not with Pride around. Shuddered Gluttony. I still remember the first time he offered to let me drink some of his blood. Nobody except Envy had ever offered before, and I think that's when it started. Envy laughed. She followed him around like a lost puppy after that. It was kind of hilarious. Shut up, or I'll tell him about how we found you and Sloth making out after lights out, said Gluttony, sticking out her tongue. Tsukauchi watched them quarrel and felt bad about letting them be interviewed together, but they wouldn't say anything. So the 6 of you all ended up spending a few years at Ms. Tanaka's orphanage. When did that change? Tsukauchi said, clearing his throat. A girl with pointy teeth, moss green hair, and dusky green eyes sat across from Tsukauchi. She laughed and said, "Well, boss man, the other sins found me beat up in their backyard when most of us were 10, and even then they were all super cute. Lust, please try to focus. How did you end up there?" Tsukauchi sent a message to the bridge of his nose. Lust paused before responding with a shrug. "You know how it is. Daddy borrows money from the wrong guy in the pachinko den. Ends up in deep with the Yakuza who don't accept broke as an excuse, so they gut him and kidnap his family. Mama bats her eyes to stay alive, but they don't have much use for a preteen girl, and the one who suggested otherwise ended up next to Daddy. Suffice it to say, I got the shit beat out of me, but they let me go. Somehow pride convinced the others to try to rescue my mom and escape the orphanage, but that went tits up. Should have known a half-dozen kids wouldn't stand much of a chance against Yakuzas, but we apparently did something right." "What do you mean?" Tsukauchi frowned. A bit of Lust's collar revealed a logo resembling a ram. "They branded each of us after a few weeks and started forcing us to work or fight for their amusement." Lust cracked a sadistic grin, but they underestimated just how strong our leader could get. "Pride stored up as much power as he could for nearly a year, and when we saw our chance, we took it. Totally went scorched earth on those assholes. Sucks that my mom switched sides at some point, but not much of a loss. If she wants to be some Yakuza's fuck buddy, then more power to her. I have a better family now, and they would never abandon me." He had just returned to Pride and told Tsukauchi about how they had set fire to the Yakuza's compound and fled with their safe's contents, which he didn't consider a crime because he believed that stealing from criminals and thieves shouldn't be considered a crime. Pride laughed. "After that, I think you know what happened since we became vigilantes and started helping the people the heroes wouldn't. We got very good at what we do if you ask me." "So you're saying a bunch of 12-year-olds not only became vigilantes, but did well enough to avoid capture for almost 4 years?" Tsukauchi asked, rubbing his temples. Pride grinned and said, "As I mentioned, we're very good at what we do." Sighing, "That just leaves me with a few last questions. Why did you attack the USJ facility with the villains and why betray them?" Pride's grin dissipated and his expression became, "We did not attack the USJ, and we were not, and would never, work with those degenerates. We went to the USJ as a favor to Greed. Her big sister made that place, and she was afraid they might hurt her. We are a lot of things, but heartless isn't one of them. When one of us asks for help, we come together and help them as best we can. Fuck the consequences. We are a family first, and nothing is going to change that." Nodded. "Walk me through it then. What happened, and how did you know it was going to happen?" Pride returned to his seat. "Well, a few weeks back Gluttony and Sloth each got word that someone was gathering a lot of D-listers for a job, and any job that requires that much manpower is never good. In a small kitchen, Pride stood stirring a big pot on the stove. "Just admit it, Pride, you're whipped. What's next? Are you going to start giving Gluttony foot massages while she takes bubble baths?" Lust said, smirking slightly as she sat on the island and watched him cook. Pride grinned. "I am not whipped, Lust. I cook because it's either me or Wrath, and you all keep complaining that his food is too spicy." Pride laughed. "Also, if you must know, my hungry queen doesn't like anyone touching her feet. She prefers neck massages instead." Lust laughed. "That's hilarious. Big bad Pride, Mr. Cruel Son, and complete simp to a 100-pound little vampire girl." As the temperature in the room began to rise, Lust saw that Pride was staring at her. She scoffed at him, not impressed. "Don't act like I'm not right. She says jump and you do. She even slightly shivers and you'd give her the shirt off your back. I'm not making fun of either of you. It's actually really cute, but I'ma call a spade, big guy." Pride sighed, turned off the heat, and went back to cooking. "I suppose you're entitled to your opinion." A few minutes later, Sloth, Greed, and Gluttony entered the kitchen with Wrath. While Sloth and Gluttony appeared concerned, Greed appeared anxious. With a growl, Wrath said, "We got a fucking problem." Pride waited in a chair after shutting off the stove and carrying the pot to their dinner table. With a tiny smile, Gluttony sat in his lap and nestled into his chest. Pride rested his head. "What kind of problem, Wrath? I'm guessing by how out of sorts you all are, it's serious." Sloth grumbled, "Potentially. I was interrogating some punks, and they let slip that somebody with a lot of clout was forming a crew for a job. They didn't know much, but they hinted at a mass meeting coming up. Anywhere from 10 to a few hundred gutter punks are coming together for a job. Gluttony howled. Right idea, wrong time slotha. Meeting was last night. I followed a few potential marks who work for that Tikgaren. I'd say we're looking at 75 maybe 120 low-level bangers with specialized or weak quirks led by some blue-haired tool in his 20s and a yellow-eyed waiter with a body made of black smoke that I've never seen before. They have passion and cash to burn, but one look told me Bluey is crazy. 60-40 on if his plan holds water, but it's almost guaranteed he'll cut and run if things don't go his way and he'll leave all of them out to dry. Pride was gnashing his teeth. Do we know the time frame or objective? As much as I'd enjoy a bit of exercise, we should probably tell that grouchy hobo instead. Let the heroes do some actual work for once. Less than a month if I had to guess, but beyond that, no clue, said Sloth, shaking his head. But, Gluttony complained, not yet. I'll keep an eye out though. Greed moaned, I don't like it. Something about this stinks. Pride smiled, I agree, but without more info there's nothing we can do. For now let's just eat some stew and not stew on the matter. Pride laughed, Sloth, go get your other half for dinner. He should be on watch in the usual place. Sloth grumbled, I keep telling that blonde moron to stop taking naps on the roof, but Cammy forbid he listens to me. So what happened next? Pride asked the teenager after pausing to let Tsukauchi catch up. Pride sighed, not much. There was almost no movement in regards to it until a couple days ago when apparently some reporters managed to break onto UA's grounds. Took that as a sign, because only a crazy person would declare war on that place directly, and our mystery mastermind fit the bill, so we got ready to move at a moment's notice. In the meantime we just did the normal stuff. Read a book, went out for a date, robbed some trigger dealers for grocery money, you know the usual. Anyway, my lovely glutton managed to finally get us a time and place, but with only about 12 hours to work with we didn't have time to set up a meeting with any of the heroes we were on acceptable terms with. As soon as Greed heard the target she insisted we go to at least make sure her big sister didn't get hurt. In the end we decided to scope it out to make sure things didn't go crazy, and it's a good thing we did. The 7 arrived just before the UA bus was supposed to arrive, and they started to get ready and look around. Lust's scowl floated over to Pride. Pride, this is bad. None of the trespasser alarms are going off with us here, which means they might already be set up inside. I don't like this. Our comms are unaffected, but this is already not looking good. Pride was about to reply, but as soon as they saw the bus begin to arrive, they all gave the signal to keep quiet. They could hear what the students were hearing when Lust grinned and tapped her command relay headset, which served as a hub for the Sin's communications. How the heck did she pull that off? Tsukauchi scowled. Pride laughed. Lust is a lot smarter than people give her credit for. Turns out one of the students had a comms device as well, that they had on and open. Don't know if they were in on it or just a moron, but this beggar is never a chooser. Back to the story. The Sins all listened in, and Greed began to gin as she heard her sister discuss the dangers of rescue work and the need to exercise caution when using a quirk. No All Might was the only issue that was becoming more pressing. Are you saying that Greed's sister is? Tsukauchi interrupted him once more. 13. Yeah, I thought that was obvious. They both have gravity quirks. Greed makes things float, and Anon-san creates a point of intense gravity aka black holes, pointed out Pride. Pride gave the order and they took their places after Aizawa and 13 had completed escorting the class inside. Greed and Wrath would take control and concentrate on keeping 13 and the students safe. If and when things went wrong, Lust would be their eyes in the sky, guiding everyone. Eventually, Pride would make a show of himself and challenge the leaders until he either prevailed or the others were done and could intervene. The others would disperse and help clean up the villains' tagalongs. The villains moved quickly, and the students became terrified. When Pride heard Aizawa's plan, he rolled his eyes, and the Sins broke through the doors on a count of 3. With Greed on his back, Wrath blasted the doors off their horses and charged straight for the back of the black, smoky villain. The villain attempted to block them with a portal, but Greed let go of her quirk, and Wraith used his explosions and restored gravity to turn it around and throw Greed in 13's direction. Greed laughed at 13 as she positioned herself between the villain and the others, while Wrath dodged and ran around Kurogiri, searching for a chance to strike him. Been a long time, Anon Neeson. How have you been? Greed asked. 13 gasped. Little Ocha. Is that really you? After taking a moment to identify the tontine in the pink hoodie and purple leggings that concealed her brown bob. Name's Greed now, sis. Pulling at the corner of her collar, she flashed the head of her fox brand. And don't worry, the sins have come to protect you all. Greed laughed and winked at her, revealing her frightened brow. Wrath leapt back after avoiding Kurogiri's wide swing, which left a big tear-like portal in the air, but Greed caught him by the hand. He grumbled with a growl. Not the time for catching up, Foxy. This guy is stupid hard to hit and dodging his portals is fucking annoying. Feel like getting that cute ass in gear. Oh my poor angry dragon, is one little smoking hazard too much for you? Don't worry, I've got your back. Meteor shower. Greed grinned evilly and slammed the floor. Shards of concrete shot out of the smoke like several shotgun blasts, and Kurogiri had to concentrate to stop them, especially as the two moved and continued to produce explosions. Kurogiri simply let out a great deal of smoke with a loud roar of annoyance, forcing Greed and Wrath to separate and creating portals beneath the feet of the majority of the students. Greed had to watch as half of the students in her wrath were twisted away, but she felt more at ease when she saw his self-assured smirk. He would return to her. He would never desert her. As this was happening, Lust sent Gluttony, Sloth, and Envy to rescue locations so they could begin crippling gangs of thugs. Sloth belongs to Ruin's Zone, Gluttony to the Mountain Zone, and Envy to the Downpour Zone. Lust watched as the portals opened and teenagers began to pour out of the USJ. Why send each of them to those zones specifically? Tsukauchi interrupted once more. Pride complained, Detective, these interruptions are getting annoying. The teenager gasped. Gluttony is the quickest of the three, so she got one of the zones furthest away. The USJ is sectioned off into 6 main zones according to our research. Going clockwise, it's the entrance, ruins, landslide, mountain, conflagration, flood, and downpour. Beyond that, my glutton does as she pleases and I'd never dream of controlling her chaos. As for Sloth and Envy, they got sent to those zones due to their quirks. Downpour is dark and loud, perfect for sneaking about and ambushing morons while borrowing any decent quirks, and the ruins has a lot of cover and hiding spots to use to gain tactical advantage while mimicking voices to mind control the dumb. You'd have to ask them for the play-by-plays in their zones though. We haven't had much of a chance to debrief due to Pride shock his wrists to make the chains and cuffs creak. It turned out that neither Sloth or Envy felt very talkative, and just smirked at Tsukauchi when he asked, but Gluttony was more than happy to tell the duster-clad man all about it. Oh, that was so fun. Those idiots never saw me coming. Cut tendons on some, a few blows to the temple on others. I was good though, I left them alive. Don't tell my buff kitty, but I tasted a few. Gluttony whispered, they tasted terrible. Not warm, spicy, and mouth-watering like my pride. Tsukauchi looked nervous and uncomfortable, and Gluttony giggled. Anyway, so I was making my way up the mountain knocking out thugs, when I saw some super cute girls. One was a tall girl with long silky black hair and a huge chest, and the other a punk girl that was shorter with short purple hair, but looked really cool. The tall one was fighting with a staff while the other had a sword. Since they seemed to have it in hand, I just stopped and watched, but as I did they seemed to be having some trouble, and I didn't like the looks they were getting. Shuddering, Tsukauchi said, I can imagine. I've read some of the criminals' rap sheets. Gluttony sighed, trash is trash. Anyway, I snuck up behind the biggest thug and took him out. Since he looked like the touchy type, I made sure to kick him in the crotch too, but once he was out his friends went down real easy. The girls seemed really nervous, so I did what Pride and Envy told me would help and it worked. With narrowed eyes, Tsukauchi asked, and that was? The cuffs remained on the table as Gluttony pulled up her hood and stood up. As she flashed the boar brand around her neck and performed a showman's bow, Gluttony said, hello there. I'm Gluttony of the 7 deadly sins, and I'm here to save you. Don't worry, you'll be safe soon. Tsukauchi asked, why aren't you still in your cuffs? As his eye twitched. She blushed, oops, well in my defense, they're super uncomfy and I didn't like wearing them. Can't I just promise to not attack anyone? You already took away my babies, can't we just ignore this? Tsukauchi breathed a sigh of relief. Gluttony, your babies are very sharp illegal stilettos and other knives, but I suppose it would be a waste of time to recuff you. That's the 8th set you've slipped out of in the last 3 hours alone. Clearly, They don't work on you. Cheered. Thanks Couchy-san. Now where was I? Oh yeah, I was leading the cuties toward the entrance. We ran into a weird boy with candy cane colored hair on our way past the landslide zone, and he told the girls he was the only one who was sent there. Since I wasn't in any particular hurry, Wrath caught up with us pretty quick. He was grumbling about some smoky asshole, but I didn't pay much attention. If Kurogiri warped him to the conflagration zone, they must be dumber than I thought. He reported he cleared the zone and didn't find any students. Which is totally boring. You have a whole zone dedicated to burning and you don't even try to barbecue anyone. Missed opportunity in my opinion. So we made our way to the center, because that's where my future hubby said he'd be, and he never fails to put on a show. Gluttony looked away from the detective with a loving swoony expression. Pride relaxed. Anyway, while my family was out having fun and saving lives, I was enjoying the show. Eraserhead might not like the limelight, but watching him fight is definitely a performance like no other. The way he uses his capture scarf is breathtaking, and the way those third-rate gutter punks flailed impotently, Pride laughed. It was hilarious. Tell you the truth, when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I just sat and watched for a bit. No need to jump in when the pro had it handled, and he definitely did until that blue-haired handjob, Shigaraki, got involved. Handjob was quick, and his touch ended up being really dangerous. When he ordered the bird-faced monster to attack, I finally stepped in. And by monster you mean this, Nomu, right? Tsukauchi asked, opening a file. Pride took a serious stance, tall, buff, and with black rubbery skin, had an exposed brain. Yeah, that's the guy. He tried to punch Erasure in the head, but I caught his fist. Color me shocked when I actually had to try in order to do it, but from the surprised look on Handjob's face he was even more surprised than me. Erasure of course started making accusations even as I saved his ass. Pride grumbled in a gravelly voice, "Problem child, why are you here? Are you attacking UA with these villains? If you're here the whole problem crew must be here. You'd better not lie to me, problem child." Grumble grumble grumble. That's an interesting way to portray Eraserhead, snorted Tsukauchi. Pride sighed. Don't act like I'm wrong. Guy's a grump, but he's one of the better heroes I've met. Him and Ingenium are willing to accept the occasional tip if it saves lives. I respect that. Anyway, Handjob started ranting about it being a fluke, and told Nomu to kill us, but that didn't work out. I tried to get Eraserhead to go protect his students and let me handle the rest, but he's stubborn. He charged Nomu, but it just caught his arm and broke it like dry pasta before backhanding him toward the stairs. I caught him before the landing could snap his neck, but with a fractured face, and both of his arms useless after Handjob's quirk started rotting, one elbow and the other was bent backwards, he was definitely out of the fight. I'll admit, I might have gotten a bit heated, but I focused on beating Nomu. I didn't overreact at all. Greed sighed, so after Kurogiri warped away my support, Anon Neeson tried to use her quirk to pin him down and stop any more portal shenanigans, but that bit her in the butt, literally. Smoky shit opened a portal directly behind and in front of her and made her quirk rebound to tear up her back really bad. Before she passed out she asked me to look after the students for her and told an overly serious blue-haired boy to run to get help. I told a few students to try to stabilize 13 as much as they could while I dealt with the villain. I took advantage of the villain's overconfidence and something I noticed when we attacked him before to my advantage. Like a beginner he let me get close, believing I couldn't hurt him, but I managed to grab the only point on him that was solid, his neck brace. Pride and Wrath have been helping me figure out new uses for my quirk, and it turns out just because something doesn't have gravity that doesn't mean it doesn't have mass, so I slammed him about while holding on tight to his brace. Tsukauchi gave a nod, and that's when young Mr. Ida slipped away to get the other teachers. Greed replied, "Yup, kids quick. I got distracted when I heard our favorite hobo scream out in pain, and Kurogiri slipped my grip to return to his boss, but I saw him reappear and heard that handy fuck when he started mouthing off to our Pride." Greed gave a dark chuckle, and I can tell you from experience, you do not want to mouth off to Big Brother Pride unless you want a son shoved somewhere painful. Tamura Shigaraki was screaming about the cheater, and how his Nomu was made specifically to kill All Might, while he was having a full-on controller-tossing rage down by the fountain. As he pointed and demanded to know who, the cheating pissant, believed he was in, how dare he interfere, his anger appeared to flare. After removing his black muscle shirt to make a sling for Eraserhead's arms, Pride turned and appeared to grow a little as the USJ began to heat up. just 3 or 4 inches, but the shift from 5 feet 10 to over 6 inches was striking. Pride raised his hand to the sky as he got a few feet away from Shigaraki and Nomu, and a fire axe spun into his grasp. Before striking a commanding pose with the axe on his shoulder, Pride smiled and thanked Lust in a whisper. I am Pride, leader of the 7 deadly sins, and I have been burdened with the ultimate responsibility. You believe yourself powerful, but who decided that? You believe yourself worthy to kill the symbol of peace, but who decided that? You even have the audacity to believe some trumped-up monster can defeat me. How dare you decide? Only the strongest has that right, and in that, I stand alone. Pride vanished and reappeared behind Nomu's back just before it collapsed to the ground as a heap of charred limbs, accompanied by a burst of speed and a surge of heat. No. This isn't right. He's supposed to be perfect. My perfect anti-symbol of peace. How dare you do this to him? Shigaraki shook and scratched his neck angrily. As he glared at Shigaraki, Pride exhaled white smoke and said, I am the lion sin of Pride, and only I have the right to decide. You have made your last mistake, you handjob-looking fuck. I will be taking those hands of yours to prevent you from abusing your power again, but first, you will kneel before me. Before hissing, Nomu, turn him into meaty chunks, Shigaraki stopped screaming and just stared at Pride with all of his hate, as if his fury had finally reached a breaking point. Pride turned to face a fully recovered Nomu and grinned, well, it seems you're going to be a lot more fun to crush than I thought. Pride felt clawed fingers slam into the small of his back and snorted, a back massage won't save you now, monster. Pride swung his axe again, and Nomu attempted to catch it, but it cut the monster's arm down the middle to the elbow instead. Unfortunately, Nomu jerked his bloody, regenerating limb, breaking the wooden belly of the axe, but Pride didn't react, not even with a hint of annoyance. After that, both fighters punched each other for 5 minutes in a row. Pride's punches became hotter with each swing and took longer to regenerate, so it was soon obvious who was winning despite neither blocking nor bothering to dodge. The monster never flinched or slowed, but soon he was punching burnt spots consistently, and they crumbled like charcoal. At last, Pride forced the monster to kneel in front of him by driving one of his extremely hot fists into Nomu's hip. You fought well, monster, but it is time to rest, divine spear. Pride grinned and lifted a single finger, driving it through Nomu's jaw's underside and up through its brain with a powerful swing. Before Nomu collapsed, unable to live, without a functional brain, the pink mass briefly smoked and appeared to cook. Pride turned to face Shigaraki after respectfully lowering the body back onto its back, only to discover him struggling against Kurogiri as he pulled him through a portal. When the teachers rushed inside to save the students, they saw this scene. Shigaraki's curse of vengeance, don't think you've won, you cocky bastard. I'll be back, and when I'm done you'll be the one on your knees. Do you hear me? I will have my revenge. Was the last thing anyone heard from him before the portal closed and Pride gave the teachers a frustrated huff. They all recognized the man in front of them when they saw the brand on his back. Pride sighed. You know what happened after that. My family agreed to be taken in to prevent more needless violence. Greed was escorted to the hospital with her sister, and the UA staff rounded up the remaining thugs. I know this meeting was protocol, but now it's my turn to ask a question. I expected to be transported to Tartarus by now, but that hasn't happened. Tell me, detective, why am I still here? At that moment, a small, white creature with a terrified expression and a vest entered the interrogation room through the open door. Am I a mouse, a dog, a bear? I'll tell you I'm, the figure said, bowing and grinning with his beady black eyes. Principal Nezu, it's a surprise to see you here. I thought you might be listening in, but to actually come forth, that's an honor, or so I'm told, said Pride with an earnest smile. Nezu felt somewhat deflated. Yay, I suppose it is. As for why I'm here, I intend to answer your previous question. You're here because I want to make you an offer. Both yourself and Ms. Greed will join my school as students and serve community service until you graduate, at which time you will both become heroes and protect this world legally. What do you say? Are you interested? Only Greed and I, Pride asked the small chimera with an unimpressed gaze. Nezu nodded, and Pride scoffed, I refuse. Now kid, this is your chance to avoid serious jail time. Why would you turn it down? Tsukauchi stammered, taking both adults by surprise. Pride looked determined at them. Because I will not abandon my family for you or anyone else. We may not be blood, but we are all each other have, so lock me away in the deepest darkest hole you can, if you must, but don't you ever insult me like that again. I would die for them, rage for them, and walk through hell for them, so no deal. Unless my sins are with me, you have no hope of convincing me otherwise. Pride's declaration made the room a little hotter even with the quirk-canceling handcuffs and power dampeners, and Tsukauchi let out a defeated sigh, but Nezu did not. Nezu thought for a few seconds before grinning and saying, "Done." "Excuse me," blinked Tsukauchi. Nezu laughed. I accepted his counter-offer. The 7 deadly sins will be remanded to Yue's custody, and we will mold them into the greatest hero team since the Pussycats' debut. Any other requests, Pride? Pride laughed and snorted. A few, but we can discuss them later since they are minor by comparison and in no way deal breakers. Thank you for the assistance, Principal Nezu. Nezu replied with a grin, no, thank you Pride. If not for you my students could have been hurt or worse, but remember, this squares our ledgers, so don't expect any other special treatment. Pride shook Nezu's outstretched paw and said, I expected nothing less from you, sir. Nezu built a small dorm for the sins to share since they were now legally Yue's responsibility. Each was legally equipped with quirk-suppressing bracers that could only be activated or deactivated by their home teachers. You know the routine, but only search this time. We're playing nice until they give us a reason to stop. Pride looked at Lust after they were free and alone in their new home. Lust nodded, and an hour later, every camera and microphone was noted. Pride was relieved that neither bathroom had any, and there were fewer than he had anticipated. They were bothersome, and it took hours to persuade Wrath and Greed to let the ones in their room stay, but at least Nezu was showing some deference. The Sins spent the remainder of their first day unwinding and relishing their reunion. All 7 were asked to get dressed in their athletic attire and report to Field Beta for an evaluation early the following morning. Elsewhere, Nezu was waiting for the promised demonstration in a conference room with the chief of police and the president of the Hero Safety Committee when 34 teenagers, led by their 2 representatives Tenya Ida and Itsuka Kendo, burst through the door. Ida tensed when she saw who they had just interrupted, but Kendo continued, Principal Nezu, we got word that you allowed villains into the school, and intend to reform them. As the principal and the world's smartest mammal we don't have a right to fight you on this, but we demand an opportunity to see who we're dealing with. Ida replied, indeed, if these delinquents go rogue it is the teachers and ourselves who will be expected by the community to prevent their escape. In light of this, any information we can gain on their strengths and weaknesses is paramount. Nezu smirked and pressed a button on the table after a few moments, which surprised the president and police chief who had been expecting him to reject them. A huge wall-mounted monitor appeared, and the smaller screen the 3 of them had planned to watch on was pushed back into the table. Nezu raised his paws in agreement. I will give you this compromise, students. I will allow you to sit in on the assessment that's about to happen, but that's all I'm giving you. Any further information must be gained on your own and reported to me for verification. I will not allow bullying, and these 7 are more than capable of protecting themselves, so any consequences are on you. The president appeared to be about to yell as both public officials became agitated, but instead she frowned and said, have you lost your mind, rodent? These are incredibly powerful and dangerous individuals. You cannot allow first-year students to get involved. Nezu raised her paw in protest. I respectfully disagree. Not only is this a grand opportunity for them to practice information gathering, but they aren't completely incorrect on their position. The teachers, of course, are the ones actually expected to rein them in, but in the eyes of the public they are held to a double standard that can't be helped. Their successes bolster them, and their failures look bad on us. We are at the forefront of hero education for a reason, and if we don't take every opportunity given to us that can easily change. Not to mention your insistence on the sports festival has left them in a difficult position and they will need every advantage they can get if they wish to compete. The idea that they would require assistance to even defend themselves against a few clearly inexperienced and unruly villains infuriated some of the students, but they remained silent and sat with their peers to watch what was going to happen. To the students' surprise, 7 teenagers who appeared close but also normal appeared on the screen. The brunette next to him appeared kind despite her scar, and the others appeared unremarkable if a little worn out. Sure, the blonde riding on the big boy with green hair was a little strange, and the red-eyed blonde definitely gave off the air of delinquent from his scowl and posture. Aizawa, Vlad King, and Recovery Girl were waiting for them, all of them wearing stiff, severe expressions, but the green-haired boy simply bowed with an arrogant smirk. No offense, but I expected the symbol of peace to be here to hold our leash. Pride grinned as he rose from his bow down on the field. Not that I'm questioning the abilities of the three pro heroes, in any way. Vlad said, "Don't get cocky, brat. We're more than capable of dealing with you on our own without him." Agree to disagree, but let's move on. What do you want us to do, O masters of heroism? Wrath scoffed, but Pride kept grinning. Vlad's temple began to ache and Aizawa assumed control. Each of you will take the standardized fitness assessment with your quirks where appropriate. Once the 7 tests are done, we'll release you to lunch and then you'll return to your housing. While you're not actively participating, Recovery Girl will be giving you a standard wellness check so we can check you for anything you might have acquired on the run, and determine allergies and dietary restrictions. As your temporary caretakers, we have no intention to let you starve or become ill due to negligence. Am I understood? Sins. We have been challenged to a little test. I for one intend to set records and expect each of you to give these tests 200%, am I clear? WHO or we? Pride grinned and clapped his hands, causing the others to straighten and abruptly assume ready positions. Each of the 7 let out a war cry and lifted their fists. These 7 no longer looked normal to onlookers. They were a well-trained team prepared to handle any danger, but all of a sudden, a nagging fear ran up their spines. They started with the 50-meter dash, and while Sloth and Envy averaged about 7 seconds, the others made it a point to show off a little. With each step, Greed removed and reapplied her gravity to complete a long-running gait as if she were running on the moon, while Lust detached and carried her feet as she floated quickly. In roughly 6 seconds, both girls were done. Gluttony ran without the help of her quirk, just like her brother and his boyfriend, but she finished in 4 seconds, which was surprisingly fast. When it was finally their turn, Pride and Wrath gave each other a fist bump before assuming a prepared position. Wrath had kicked off his shoes, and Pride's body released a haze of heat, causing him to swell an additional few inches. They both shot forward at unbelievable speeds. Pride received the highest score of half a second, while Wrath received a 2-second score. Pride simply laughed, I should have stretched first. I'll do better on the next one. It was absurd and left everyone in the audience in shock. The grip test came next, and nearly all of the sins received scores between 60 and 80 kilograms, which was respectable but not ridiculous. The sensors were crushed like dry kindling by Wrath, Greed, and Pride. While she was doing it, they saw Greed wink at Wrath, who grinned and blushed slightly. The first event where Pride didn't demonstrate inhuman skill was repeated sidesteps. He and Wrath and Greed only received a score of about 50. However, the other events revealed a different picture. Sloth, Envy, and Lust all scored closer to 80, but Gluttony emerged victorious with an unbelievable score of more than 200. As all of the girls demonstrated that, quirk or not, they were flexible enough to lie on the ground without any problems, the seated toe touch caused some of the male classmates' eyes to widen. As a result, the winner was determined more by who had the longest limbs than by who could bend the furthest. Sloth and Envy performed similarly among the guys, but for once, Wrath and Pride were at the bottom. Pride had too much bulk in the way, and Wrath simply wasn't limber enough. Only Sloth eventually decided to give up when they were required to perform sit-ups. Everyone agreed that Lust cheated by separating her top and bottom to float back and forth, but everyone else just kept going without permission until they were told to stop after 30 minutes of non-stop action. They stopped to rehydrate in order to give Recovery Girl a break, and everyone in the conference room that had been converted into an observation room turned to Nezu, who appeared pale. Tenya Ida, her tall, blue-haired countrywoman, appeared enraged, while Itsuka Kendo, the orange-haired martial artist, appeared thoughtful and worried. Ida began to growl, "Principal, I must insist you explain exactly who these delinquents are. Their performance is impossible to the point of implied chemical assistance." "Hiro, that's not possible, Ida. Recovery Girl is right there. If they were on quirk stimulates then she'd know," said a different student with big hands and eyes. Nezu gave a nod. "Very true, Asui-chan. What's more, some haven't used their quirks at all yet, and with the exception of young Wrath the rest have used them sparingly. What you've seen is just raw physical conditioning for the most part, especially in the case of young Sloth, Envy, and Gluttony. As for who they are, they're the 7 deadly sins," said the president of the HSC with a frown. "A group of insufferable teenage vigilantes that I'm happy to get off the streets. Though I'd prefer them on the lowest level of Tartarus." The police chief snarled, and they watched as his skin began to smoke and burn like heated magma. Nezu sighed. "Now chief, that's a bit harsh. These 7 have a better capture rate than most of the top 20, and if you exclude the blatant vigilantism, they have cleaner records as well. In the few years they've been active they've managed fewer accidental casualties than Endeavor and he's the number 2 hero. The commander stared at Nezu. My little brother has nothing to do with this, rat. Don't forget, I can end this little experiment at any time. The president cleared her throat. Don't overstep, Sakazuki. I am the one with final say here, and don't forget it. Your office may not serve mine, but without us your officers would suddenly find themselves woefully outgunned. As pieces of magma appeared and the chief's lip began to twitch, the heat in the room increased. Is that a threat, Masayoshi-san? Nezu asked. Now, is this really something you wish to discuss in front of my students? After the president failed to look at him or respond, both adults froze, gathering themselves into a professional stance once more. Nezu turned back to the monitor and said, it looks like they're going to continue. Let's see what they have for us next. He did this while clapping his paws and grinning evilly. Since each sin cleared the box, albeit in a different manner, the standing long jump was intriguing. Greed decided to go first and used her zero gravity to float over. After giving her a high five, Envy nearly exactly duplicated her performance. Wrath used his explosions to rocket over, but when Sloth was dazed, Wrath gave him a boost by throwing him with an explosion as he leapt from Wrath's palms. Lust drifted over as Wrath gave him an upside-down head slap. After whispering something in Greed's ear that caused the brunette to blush, Gluttony held out a finger, which she gently bit and sucked for a brief moment, causing many onlookers to doubt both the circumstances and themselves. Gluttony looked exactly like Greed when a clay-like liquid covered her a moment later. She also floated over, albeit less steadily. Pride appeared to perform a reverse hero landing to eliminate them by crouching, vanishing, and then landing on the opposite side of the athletic field. However, Pride was next to one of the Greeds a few seconds later, messaging her back as she puked and reverted to her Gluttony persona. Soon after, a recovery girl joined them, and they struck up a brief conversation. After giving the girl a quick peck on the head, the older medic turned to leave and took out her data pad. Something important, Principal, the president asked impatiently as Nezu's chimed with an update and message after she had finished putting it away. After reading and nodding, Nezu responded, it seems that some of our worries about young Gluttony were baseless, but others are all too plausible. After a few pupils regarded him with suspicion, a well-dressed girl with a long ponytail said, what do you mean, Principal Nezu? Nezu turned to speak to his pupils. Well, Yaoyorozu-chan, Gluttony's quirk, copy, caused a bit of a scare for the government. By consuming a bit of someone's blood she can look and sound like them. With time to study a target beforehand, she can even copy mannerisms. She is a flawless actress, but what was more concerning is that she can replicate quirks. We weren't sure about the specifics until now, but thankfully it's not as bad as we first thought. How bad is it though? The chief snarled. Nezu smirked. That depends on the quirk, and the downsides they come with. As you just saw, she replicated Greed, and did a fairly decent job of using it. The problem is, Gluttony doesn't get the support structures to minimize the downsides. In this case, Greed's body is adapted to lessen the effects of zero-G on her organs and has trained to make herself even more hardy. Gluttony has neither advantage, so she ended up vomiting. Another example would be your own quirk, Yaoyorozu-chan. She could replicate the ability to convert lipids into objects, but without the knowledge of atomic structures or your specialized fat cells, limiting her possible options. The worst example would be our chief of police though. Imagine the power to control and produce magma, but without a body capable of handling the heat. More likely than not she'd kill herself even trying to use it from dehydration and internal burns. In short, she can look and sound like anyone, but she's not them. A perfect actress, but only an actress at the end of the day. The room fell silent in shock and disbelief as the government officials exchanged a look and nodded, saying, this is for the best. We already have Pride to deal with, we don't need his girlfriend to be an All Might level threat as well. The Sins had been going through the distance run in the interim. All 7 were performing well for the first 5 minutes, but after that, they began to wane. Sloth and Envy left first and simply lay in the grass, followed shortly after by Lust, who appeared worn out despite floating the whole time. Pride and Wrath exchanged glances as Greed and Gluttony began to falter, and they silently gathered the 2 girls into their arms, cuddling them into a cozy position. Both teenagers appeared to be completely happy to run themselves to death while grinning, and their speed seemed to suddenly triple. The expression in their eyes was familiar to all. This was an excuse to keep the people they cared about the most in the world, not a test anymore. At that point, the race to see who would tap out first was less important. When the teachers finally called time, neither boy let go of their girlfriends until they were kissed. The majority of the students thought they understood the strength of the seven now, but they were going to be shown to be mistaken. Greed went first once more in the final test and received an infinite score on the ball throw. Before she threw, Lust floated the ball for approximately 100 meters with her detached hand. Prior to Envy throwing for him by launching the ball with a tremendous explosion for about 736 meters and receiving a kiss in return, Sloth and Envy went into the circle together. Envy wasn't finished, though, as he and Gluttony approached Pride's sides and whispered something that caused the enormous adolescent to frown but extend his hands. Before they both went into the circle and threw, Gluttony bit one and Envy briefly held the other. Gluttony's arm and Envy's sleeve both burned away in a sudden explosion of flame, earning 802.6 and 802.7 meters, respectively. The burnt condition of Gluttony's arm horrified Recovery Girl, but she was shocked when her brother kissed it and it healed. At a distance of 1.01 kilometers, Wrath took the next step and revealed who the true explosive king was, but Pride just kept frowning. Gluttony's throw had made him wince, and his frown had only gotten worse ever since. When Wrath and the other sins saw the expression, they ordered everyone to hide before Pride took the field to toss. He swelled a little earlier, but this time he grew even larger and didn't even mind when his shirt blew. His body blazed and glowed like the sun as he stood in the ring, and then he threw back, creating a loud boom that could be heard for miles. In contrast to Greed's throw, the ball evaporated due to heat and air friction rather than leaving the atmosphere. He stood in the sun like a teenage All Might for a moment as the heat billowed off of him, but then he let out a sigh and deflated before approaching Gluttony and giving her a gentle embrace. "Oh, quite extraordinary. I was assured those tracking balls were indestructible. I'll have to send a copy to our distributor. Young Pride just got the school a large windfall since they have a satisfaction guarantee. It's regrettable that we'll have to wait to get an accurate distance, but I suppose this was to be expected." The other adults nodded, but the teenagers remained shell-shocked as they stared at an opponent none of them thought they could stop. Nezu simply laughed and clapped his paws. None of them noticed the skeletal man with blonde hair, specifically Pride's, who was hiding while watching the teenagers perform. In addition to genuine fear and trepidation at what he was witnessing, Toshinori also felt a sensation of warmth in his chest. He remembered a brilliant, pure beam of light, but this boy was not that. A fierce, blazing sun that is hot and possibly deadly. Reading young Midoriya's record and recalling the day his life almost ended filled Toshinori with a great deal of shame. Toshinori was back there, surrounded by rubble, and he could feel his life was ending fast. Toshinori recalled the sensation of blood dripping from his side and the chill that crept over his body. His numbing fingers felt sticky, and then a young boy with green hair appeared. He appeared terrified yet resolute. Toshinori heard the boy say something, but he couldn't understand it because of the ringing and blood loss. In an effort to soothe the boy, All Might simply smiled and nodded. Then All Might felt a searing pain, but the bleeding ceased. Even though All Might threw up blood all over him when he tried to thank the boy never abandoned him. "This boy is worthy. I might go away, but the world will be a better place, because they are here." All Might thought as he saw the concern in the boy's eyes before he passed out, and then he was contentedly dark. Back in the present, All Might paused and gave his accidental successor a close look, and he saw him, the courageous youngster was still there. Buried beneath anger, pride, and time, that same boy who, despite his diminutive size, tried to save a dying man and offered him consolation. Toshinori was aware of his obligation. He would have to put aside his pride and assist in guiding young Izuku. A heroic mentor was not necessary for him. To help him become the person he was meant to be, rather than just a strong individual with no other goals than his work, he needed a father, a male role model, or just a reliable adult. Abruptly, Wrath approached the stern and irate Pride and gave him a shove. Wrath grumbled, "Fight me. I challenge you to a duel. Right here, right now. Only the strongest is allowed to lead, so I'll prove that's me." As Greed approached and they both moved to the sidelines, Pride looked down at Wrath and neither of them seemed concerned, as if they knew this was going to happen. Indeed, they appeared almost delighted. Pride and Wrath took up ready fighting positions in the middle of the field, with Wrath tossing aside his shirt so they were both only wearing their sweatpants. When the teachers realized they were serious, they attempted to step in, but Sloth used his peculiar ability to brainwash them to silence them. Everyone watched as the adults in charge locked up while the cameras were still rolling, and then they sat down to watch the fight. Wrath lunged at Pride with a powerful right hook, but Pride deflected it and tried to strike Wrath in the stomach with his own flaming fist. Pride simply hooked his arm around Wrath's midsection to draw him into a grapple after Wrath dodged with a brief explosive burst to reposition. Pride didn't even flinch when several explosions struck his torso. Even as he let go of Wrath, Pride stunned the shorter teenager by slamming his head into his. Pride drew back a strong, glowing right fist and slammed a huge right uppercut into Wrath's middle, sending him flying and smoking. Every non-Sin thought the battle was over for a brief moment, but then they saw Wrath reappear above them, floating on explosive blasts. Wrath started spinning and rocketing toward Pride, using explosions to increase the torque and move ever faster as he yelled, "Howitzer impact!" Below, Pride concentrated his strength into a glowing point of intense heat that quickly turned into a small sun, which he shoved toward the descending form of Wrath with the yell, "Cruel sun!" Where the two attacks met, there was a massive explosion as concussive pressure and superheated air clashed for control, followed by a flash of blinding light and a detonation. When everyone was able to see again, they saw a smoking Wrath who appeared to be extremely sunburned but was otherwise unharmed despite being utterly worn out. "Do you yield?" Pride asked, walking over and looming over. Wrath grumbled, "Never, but we'll call it a draw for now." "Feeling better, now?" He leaned down and laughed, "Yes. Thank you, Wrath. As always, I can trust you to know what I need, and knock some sense into me." Pride loomed for a moment longer. "You might lead this band of misfits, but I will always be your brother first." "It's what Aunt Inko would want," Wrath said with a sneer and a smile. Pride assisted Wrath in getting up. "And Aunt Mitsuki would want me to keep you out of trouble, so I try my best." "Come on, Greed is probably worried I broke her toy, again." Wrath laughed, "Sure, whatever, I'm sure Gluttony is over there drooling over getting to check you over for injuries. Still don't understand how you can do it. I can never tell if she wants to cut you or kiss you." Pride was blushing. "Sometimes it's one and then the other to be honest, but love is blinding." "You still going to?" With a growl, Wrath silenced Pride. "Shut it, she might hear you, but yes. I'm almost there too, just another few thousand yen and I'll be ready." Greed and Gluttony ran to their partners and kissed them before rejoining the others. "What in the hell were you two thinking? One of you could have been severely hurt," yelled the recovery girl as Wrath sat in front of Envy. Wrath laughed, "I can handle the pussy cat, so fuck off. It's better for everyone this way. If Pride didn't get the anger out, it would fester, and then you can say goodbye to this whole city. I'm the strongest of the other sins and the most durable, so it's my job to keep this moron under control. Gluttony can do it too, but I don't think we want another scare like last time." Gluttony began to cry. "Best 24 hours of my life. I thought I might be a mom, but I guess I'll just have to keep waiting." "Come on, Glutton, that's private," exclaimed Pride as the adults went pale. Gluttony winked and said, "I'll show you something private later, my king. Until then, carry me." These tests were exhausting. Pride gathered her up like a bride and she purred contentedly as she snuggled into him. "I'm killing the bedroom cams. No offense, but no free peek shows. Also, I don't know who's with you, but if you see President Bitch, tell her I know about Project New Dawn and Project 1 for 1, and I can't wait to reunite her with her predecessor. K thanks, bye." Lust winked at the teachers as the others departed. There were a dozen different responses up in the conference room. The adults all had telling looks. Some of the girls were still blushing from Gluttony's comments, some were still amazed at the battle between Wrath and Pride, and some were still afraid of what these seven were capable of. Nezu appeared like a child on Christmas, the chief was thoughtful, and the president appeared to waver between fear and rage. Nezu turned to his students and said, "A stunning display, don't you think? Now you should all rest. Classes resume on Monday with our new additions, so take the time this weekend to recover and prepare yourselves. Things are about to get very interesting." Both government representatives departed without saying anything. Lust sighed as each of the teenagers stepped away from the conversation. "What's got you down, little sister? Is the internet connection weak?" asked the blonde behind her, wearing a purple fluffy robe, as she squeezed her shoulder. Envy was only momentarily surprised when Lust turned around and hugged him back. Lust exhaled, "I don't know if this was a good idea. We haven't been social in years, and they don't trust us. Then they don't deserve to know us. Don't sweat it, little sis. You know this family's first rule, Envy said with a sly smile while brushing Lust's green hair. Don't steal mochi from greed, chuckled Lust. Envy laughed. Nope, that's Rule 12. Rule 1 is that no matter what, we are always there for each other. Even if we separate for a time, we will always return to support each other. Thanks, I needed that. By the way, isn't this Sloth's robe? Lust squeezed Envy once more. Envy grinned. Those tests got everyone all sweaty, so we took a shower. My honey bear doesn't need to know I borrowed it. She let him go and opened a drawer full of instant noodles, but Lust grinned and said, agreed. You'd better slither back though. Brother Bear gets cranky without his serpent to snuggle. Lust laughed at Envy's sardonic expression and said, Pride doesn't need to know about these either. Go rest, I'm going to try to hack the main server some more before lunch. Love you, Envy. After rolling his eyes and turning to go, Envy grinned and said, sure. Love you too, Lust. Don't get another virus. Lust then got back to work. Vlad and Eraserhead took up the task of showing the Sins the facilities and the location where they were supposed to report the next day. The training gyms were stocked, so it wasn't a complete waste even though it was mostly dull. Additionally, it was explained that before starting regular classes the following day, the Sins would take a written exam to determine where they needed tutoring. Before classes, Tetsu, Kirishima, Kendo, Rin, and Ojiro were on their way to the UA gym to work out when they heard yelling coming from inside. They were shocked to discover that Wrath was yelling at Envy, Sloth, and Lust Reed as trained, while he encouraged them to dig deeper and continue as they bench pressed heavy but typical amounts. Greed was doing the same thing next to them, but she was carrying more weight than the other three put together, and she had a frightful smile on her face. Gluttony was engrossed in a series of yoga poses that appeared to be extremely painful for even the most flexible individuals, but Pride was the one who took them by surprise the most. All of the students were informed during their first visit about a particular piece of equipment that needed written consent before anyone could approach it. It used multi-ton weights for weighted squats and was intended for students with strength quirks. Pride, who was benching 40 tons at the moment, appeared to be enjoying himself based on the broad smile on his face. To put it simply, all 5 of them felt deeply inadequate when they witnessed someone their age bench press the average weight of an empty train car, but it also ignited a fire inside of them. The 5 started working on another set of weights, but after a few minutes, they noticed Greed, who was sweating and had pink cheeks, approach Tetsu and Kirishima and give them an approving look before tapping the steel boy on the shoulder. Both of you need to get lower and put more emphasis on leg strength. Power comes from the legs and hips. You're both heavy brawlers, so you need to get low and really hit at your opponent's knees. It doesn't matter how tough you are, Greed said, taking his place after he retreated. If you don't have a leg to stand on, now get over here and dig deep, both of you. If you want to be the best, you have to never stop improving. Greed moved aside to observe the 2 boys as they followed instructions. After giving them a few more pointers, Greed approached Gluttony. The blonde cheerfully led her through a few stretches and forms that caused her to wince in agony, but Gluttony was there to support her patiently the entire time. Before everyone heard Wrath stomp over to Pride and yell, "Come the fuck on, you lazy bastard. Cut the warm-up and get serious." Everyone watched as the irate blonde pressed a button on the wall and 2 more 5-ton weights fell onto Pride's shoulders. As the teenager got used to the new weight, there was a sudden surge of heat and a roar, but his smile remained unwavering. Pride kept pushing as if nothing had happened, and they saw the fire burn brighter in his eyes. They saw Wrath pushing himself as hard as he did the others, but he scoffed and went to do his own reps. He used the quarter and then half-ton weights instead of wasting time with the common weights. Some wondered if his quirk also had a strength component, but they were unsure. After a while, everyone showered before class, and the non-Sins finally had a chance to see their new classmates fully nude, though it was difficult not to. To their increasing dismay, the crimson marks that each had, which most of them mistakenly believed to be tattoos, were actually brands, which caused several boys to hesitate when they saw that Pride's covered his entire upper back. How hot was the brand really to burn someone who could easily make suns? All 7 had scars beyond that. While some appeared new, others were obviously quite old. Furthermore, after witnessing how hard Wrath pushed them, it was easy to believe that even the least fit of the 7 appeared extremely toned and athletic. While Nezu oversaw the test with ectoplasm and his clones on Overwatch, the Sins were dispersed to avoid cheating in a lecture hall reserved for special speakers. Each was given several subject-specific tests in addition to the suggested exam, and Lust laughed when she discovered she had an additional coding exam. They completed all of the tests quickly, and Nezu appeared almost ecstatic as they went over them. With unrestricted access to the school, Wrath and Greed went to a training room and had their own sort of date in which they competed to see who could destroy a group of robots the quickest, while Pride and Gluttony found a tree to nap under. It was amazing to hear Wrath's anger and sincere pride following each defeat. In their spare time, Lust, Envy, and Sloth decide to search various websites for information about a few interesting people they've heard about. When they finally got together again for lunch, the room fell silent as soon as they entered the cafeteria. As they received their lunches, everyone shifted aside and gave them a sidelong glance. A few stood out, but the majority had the typical fare. People's eyes burned from the sheer amount of spice in Wrath's food. Pride must have consumed at least 6 times as much as any one person should be able to consume. And then there was Gluttony, blood pudding, blood sausage, and, for crying out loud, a blood bag for a drink that made some students actually shudder. Everyone's attention was drawn to the blood, regardless of whether she also had grilled fish or white rice. The Sins moved to a solitary table by the window and ate in silence, ignoring the looks. The entire room exuded a heavy sense of tension, but the third-year heroic students could see the tension all 7 maintained, like springs ready to run or defend themselves at any time. Then all of a sudden, it exploded. A bowl of noodles was hurled at Gluttony's head as the lights flickered and half the room went dark. Pride quickly used his body to protect her, but more than that, the other Sins gathered in formation. Greed and Wrath stood on either side of Pride, one with glowing popping palms and the other in a boxing or grappling stance. With expressions of pure contempt, Lust, Sloth, and Envy stood behind them, getting ready to help. The room began to heat up as Pride slowly turned with a look of thunderous rage, but no one moved or attacked. Pathetic, all of you. You aren't worth our time. Pride scooped up a shaking Gluttony and stomped off, followed by the other Sins, as everyone briefly began to perspire due to the intense heat. After they left, everyone began arguing and chatting about what had happened until someone pointed out some horrifying scorch marks. Every step Pride took on his way out had left a melted patch or mark on the ground. They wondered how close they had come to having the same fate, and a new wave of fear swept through them. Even when Vlad and Eraserhead stopped by to pick them up, the Sins refused to leave their base for the remainder of the day. 2 enormous boulders began to float before they could even approach, and 2 angry teenagers were standing on them with glowing palms. As he blasted off a piece of his boulder, Wrath yelled, "Get lost. We aren't fucking interested in your bullshit right now. Unless you're here to deliver the fuckwit that made Gluttony cry, fuck off." And threw a shower of debris in front of the 2 as a warning. After a minute of arguing out of earshot, the hero pair turned around and walked away. Greed emerged from hiding and allowed the boulders to return to their resting spots after they had left. Pride, meanwhile, was letting Gluttony chew on his arm while keeping her close. Gluttony found it comforting for some reason, but she didn't bite hard enough to break the skin because she didn't want blood right then, and Pride wouldn't care if she did. Since they first met, Pride had made an effort to shield her, but that didn't change the fact that she had never been accepted outside of her family. She had been called a monster or teased by children. Her needs were demonized or beaten by adults. Sometimes it was just too much, and coming close to being attacked in that way was just too familiar. Even though she was a fearsome opponent in a fight, she was still a teenage girl seeking acceptance. Nezu took control of their television that evening to deliver their findings, as they had declined his offer to do so earlier in the day. The white-furred principal was ecstatic to report that none of them needed tutoring prior to starting their regular classes, and some of them could just test out of a subject. Sloth and Envy could skip literature and history, Pride could skip English, and Lust and Wrath could skip science if they so desired. They both considered the information and decided to give it some thought, but they had a more pressing matter to deal with. Greed grumbled, "What are you going to do about the attempted attack on Gluttony? You told us we would be safe here." "Well, I for one don't feel safe." "That was truly unfortunate, but," Nezu sighed. Wrath yelled, "Unfortunate. I'll show you unfortunate when I start blowing down walls to find this asshole and turn them into paste. Nobody hurts our family and gets away with it," causing Nezu to rub his temples. Sloth complained, "Do you at least have a suspect? An apology is owed, and punishment would go a long way in repairing this situation." Nezu nodded. Whatever or whoever made the lights flicker, knocked out the cameras for a few seconds as well, and no one has come forward with any witness testimony, so I'm afraid there is little that can be done. Young Gluttony, you have my deepest apologies for this happening and I hope this hasn't caused you too much distress. With a sniff, Gluttony said, It's okay. I'm used to it. Pride gave her another cozy embrace and gave Nezu a stern look. Nezu nodded. It is not, and you shouldn't need to be. Going forward you have my assurance that something like this won't happen again. Any further acts of bullying or mistreatment against any of you will result in severe punishment, you have my word. Now, I believe it is lights out. Please rest well, because tomorrow will be a better day. He's not lying. I tried every trick I know, but the footage just doesn't exist. Beyond that there were dozens of people in that room who could have caused the short. Electrical quirks aren't that rare, and they aren't the only way to do something like this. Magnetism or certain heat quirks could set off a small EMP as well. Not to mention it could have been 2 or more people working together. Without more data, there really isn't anything we can do. She started researching every student on campus, beginning with the instructors and third-year students and working her way down. The following day was reserved for an all-day heroics class that included the sins in both 1A and 1B. As the 35 students who were still enrolled in the first-year heroics course stood in costume with Aizawa and Vlad, they each whispered and gossiped about what they should anticipate. This was due to the fact that 3 students from 1A were expelled after their quirk assessment, and 2 students from 1B dropped out after the USJ. Wrath, wearing a black sleeveless tank top and black cargo pants, emerged from the tunnel first. A belt bearing his dragon brand and a pair of orange straps ran across his chest. He was equipped with an orange domino mask, a visor over his right eye, reinforced iron boots, and a grenade-shaped gauntlet. Greed was the next to emerge wearing a skin-tight space suit with red sleeves and pink body, along with fingerless gloves. She wore a black half-helmet with a visor on her head, matching the steel reinforcements on her gloves and boots. There was a fox on her gloves and belt. Sloth and Envy crept out after her. Sloth is dressed in a long-sleeved shirt, cargo pants, and dark purple boots, while Envy is dressed in a stylish black suit. They both have utility belts, one featuring Sloth's bear and the other Envy's serpent. A mask was wrapped around Sloth's neck, and as they turned, some people saw the almost imperceptible microphone and earphone that Envy was wearing. Even though their styles were diametrically opposed, the two appeared content as they strolled next to one another, creating a reassuring atmosphere. Lust appeared wearing a domino mask made of the same material and a scaly light purple bodysuit. The headset around her head had the same copper glow as the wavy, weight-like bracers around her wrists and ankles. Along with a few obvious tools, such as a wire cutter, a length of wire, and a screwdriver, her utility belt bore her ram symbol. The enormous version of Pride, with Gluttony on his back, emerged last. Pride wore crimson combat boots, black cargo pants, and a dark green open long-sleeve vest with black fur lining the edges. There was no doubt who Pride was because his utility belt featured a full-sized professional wrestler buckle in addition to the lion symbol. Gluttony, on the other hand, was the only one without a utility belt or gear visible. Instead, she wore a gold unitard that, aside from her hands, covered everything below her neck. Although some people drooled, no one asked how she managed to move in something so skin-tight and presumably constrictive. With everyone in attendance, Vlad began the explanation by clearing his throat loudly and saying, "Shut it, maggots. Today we have a special heroics test for all of you. Since the Sins have a great deal more practical experience than any of you, we decided to use that experience to the betterment of all involved. I'll be recording and on standby to step in if the need arises, so fear not, I am here." All Might's voice could be heard over the speakers. Aizawa grinned. "Here's how this will work. Much like your first heroics class, a villain will be in possession of a faux bomb, namely one of the Sins. You remaining 35 will take turns drawing balls from this box to determine teams of 3. We'll need 2 volunteers to make up a team of 2. Ida replied, "This seems incredibly unfair. You expect 3 of us to go against one of them." Vlad actually laughed darkly as he said, "You're right, it's not fair. That's why we're giving the heroes one more advantage to give you a chance at victory. You get to pick your opponent." Aizawa snorted and his eyes glowed red. Aizawa shrugged, "Or we can choose your opponents if you want to keep complaining." After a wave of anxiety swept through the 1A and B students, everyone turned to see Pride grinning sweetly while Gluttony nuzzled his face, causing their perspiration to drop before they fell silent. Shoto Todoroki and Toguro Kamikiri stepped forward to offer to fight alone, then glared at one another. They could be the team of two if they were so willing to volunteer, said the two homeroom teachers, rolling their eyes. Before declaring, then we demand to challenge him. Both scowled even more. Pride stood, clapped, and held his hands apart, saying, "Sure. I accept, but we should hold off for the final match. Otherwise there might not be a test area to use going forward." Everyone turned pale when they saw who the two were pointing to. Pride sat back down, and the two complained about having to wait, but they moved aside to do just that. After everyone had been divided into teams, Vlad said, "You don't have to choose right away, but no one is allowed to challenge the same sin back to back, for your own good. If you wish to wait till your round comes around, that is acceptable as well. Also, the sins win if you take more than 20 minutes. The first group stepped forward with a lecherous look, but the rest of the class murmured. Before either of his teammates could say anything, Minoru Mineta pointed to Lust and said, "We'll go against the cute one with sharp teeth." Lust laughed but made a showman's bow before walking off. Kaminari, Suburaba, and Minoru Mineta all glanced at the girls. Strangely, everyone in the room except for the other sins looked repulsed, but no one noticed how the little teen drooled. Rather, they merely exchanged a few grins before Sloth gave us 2 fingers. Envy held up 4 and shook his head. Greedy laughed, 6, but in less than 4 and an extra 2 that the grappist ends up crying. "All right, last call. I'll raise you to 15, and none of them even see her," said Pride, shaking his head. "Care to tell us what exactly you reprobates are on about?" Ida finally yelled, getting irritated at not understanding what they were discussing. Gluttony laughed. "Calm down, Robo Jr. Whenever one of us ends up in a solo fight, we make it a game to bet on the outcome. In this case, Sloth bet 2 chore days on Lust winning. Envy raised the bet to 4. Greed bet 6 days along with 2 additional stipulations that she'll win in less than 4 minutes and an extra 2 days that the purple kid will end up crying. Finally Pride grew the pot to 15 days, and added a 3rd limitation. "Can I get in on this?" Mina asked, holding up a hand. The sins shrugged and motioned for her to continue. Mina laughed. "I'll bet 3 pieces of gossip and a chocolate cheesecake on Denki self-destructing or Mineta not only crying, but begging for more. At least one is guaranteed." After a minute of horrified looks from her classmates, Pride laughed and said, "I'll take that bet." "Best of luck, Ashido-san." Mina blinked in shock, but before she could ask how he knew her name, All Might approached the speaker and the round started. Everyone in the observation room looked at the displays, hoping to see Lust setting up traps or defending the bomb, but Lust was nowhere to be found. Rather, they discovered the 3 perverts sneaking in as quietly as they could while Mineta struggled with his partner's decisions. Mineta acknowledged that any other option would have been worse over the microphones. As he put it, no pair of tits, or plump ass is worth having to fight those monsters, even exquisite examples like Gluttony's chest or Greed's backside. The deadly aura emanating from Pride and Wrath was sending chills through All Might in the adjacent room, but Greed and Gluttony simply exchanged glances as if they were debating something. After a moment, both girls shrugged and said, "He's not completely wrong though. She is hot." They then looked at one another and began to laugh before sighing, "My man is hotter though." Suddenly, the laughter stopped, and they began to glare at one another. Back at the exercise, Kaminari was abruptly pulled away by a line of tape that emerged from the shadows and pulled him back into a room that the 3 had just examined before locking. All Might announced over the speakers, "Denki Kaminari has been captured." Suburaba abruptly collapsed before they could do anything more than attempt to break through the door in order to save Denki. Kosei Suburaba has been captured. In fear, Mineta retreated from the doors, walls, and Suburaba. When he felt gentle, powerful fingers on his shoulders, they moved menacingly around his throat, causing him to shudder. After emerging from a vent behind him, Lust's floating head whispered something in the teen's ear. His response made the teachers look sick, but the microphones weren't powerful enough to capture it on the main screens. Then they saw Lust repeatedly slamming into his nethers, one at a time, with all 4 weighted bands and both of her detached feet. Mineta's yelling and pleading for more from the mistress was the last sound they heard before All Might called the match. When the 3 boys returned, they appeared a little perplexed, but Lust appeared bored. "Okay, where did the heroes go wrong?" sighed Aizawa. Momo grinned. "They let appearances deceive them. They forgot that their opponent was not only a vigilante, but a successful one. I can't really critique anything else, because I couldn't tell what she did." The teachers blinked when Pride said, I'll fill you in then. Lust's quirk is Lizard Tail Splitter. She can literally fall to pieces and reform without any issue. As such, she used the vents to travel unseen, and the fact her parts float to do so silently. Nobody ever thinks to check the vents, so you would be amazed how convenient they are since they have to go everywhere in order to have proper airflow. Pride laughed, and the winners are Ashido-san and myself. Nobody saw Lust, and the grappist ended up begging for more. Gross, but a win is a win. Aoyama, Kota, and Kodai came next, and after deliberating for a minute, they decided on Envy. Envy left with a showman's bow, and his 3 opponents followed shortly after. The betting took place again, and Gluttony placed a strange wager that her brother would win without any peculiarities. With one piece of gossip at stake, Toru took that wager since none of the sins did, and he retorted that the 3 would win without getting hit. Ultimately, it was Gluttony. Nobody had anticipated Envy's agility, but he skillfully danced around Aoyama's beams before using a chop to knock him out. Kota attempted to use birds, but for some reason they wouldn't approach Envy. When Kodai attempted to outrun him and block the path behind her with rocks, she was pinned. The class continued since there wasn't much more to say than that all 3 needed to improve their hand-to-hand skills. Yanagi, Komori, and Kuwaro who decided to fight Gluttony. She kissed Pride as she went by and then did a backhand spring out the door. The sins did not place any bets this time, and even they acknowledged that they had no idea what she would do. When the other teenagers saw this, they became obviously concerned. Pride hummed in admiration as Kuwaro slipped into the girls' shadows before the 3 of them entered the building. Neither Yanagi nor Komori noticed any indication that Gluttony was present for the first few floors. Then Komori squeaked in agony as the lights went out. There were now 2 Komoris when the lights were restored. Nobody moved until one of the Komoris said, "Kuwaro should be in the real Komori's shadow, right? All he has to do is poke his head out and that will prove I'm the real one." Kuwari did just that, emerging from the shadow of the other Komori, but all 3 heroes passed out and the remaining Komori began to melt, exposing Gluttony underneath, who gave the camera a peace sign. Gluttony was laughing when they got back to the observation room, and Komori was actually having a lively conversation with her. They discovered what had occurred in this way. A while back, Gluttony tried a variety of mushrooms on a wager, and one of them contained tiny amounts of spores that caused sleep. Kuwari might have attacked her when the others fainted, so she had to wait for him to stick his head out. If it came down to it, she was sure she could defeat him, but being confined to an unfamiliar body might have given him an opportunity, and that was definitely not acceptable. Su, Tokiyami, and Shishida faced off against Sloth in the subsequent round. And the betting pool was crazy. Ultimately, Envy wagered a whole month's worth of household tasks that Sloth would remain in one place and not be struck. Ida, in the meantime, became enraged at the obvious disrespect and placed his own wager that Sloth would lose and that none of the hero team would lose. Sloth was sitting outside with his back to the wall and his legs crossed when the hero team arrived. He yawned and said, "I really don't want to fight any of you. Can we just call this a draw, so I can go back to sleep?" The 3 heroes exchanged a look, shook their heads, and froze. With a sigh, Sloth said, "Match over, they're caught." Sloth didn't explain anything when they got back, so Pride had to do it. It turns out that the sleeper was Sloth's ultimate move. His quirk usually requires a verbal response, but he can push it to activate with any kind of response if he closes his eyes and remains motionless. It was an all-or-nothing move, though, because in order to pull it off, he had to completely relax and give up any other offensive or defensive attempts, and he was currently limited to controlling 5 people at once. Additionally, the effects stop and he becomes a sitting duck if he moves or loses focus. The following team gets ready for their turn after Aizawa clears his throat. Mina, Juzo, and Bondo huddled together, looking between the sins. Gluttony grinned back at Mina after a brief exchange of smiles. Pride was prepared this time, so when she attempted to sneak a kiss, he pulled her in close, leaving her completely stunned by the intense kiss. After grinning and laughing, Gluttony winked and ran off. "You really love her, don't you?" Momo asked with a smile. Pride murmured, "Yes, I love her with my whole being. I just wish, it doesn't matter. So as much as it pains me to do it, 1 week on the heroes." Wrath complained, "We know, nerd. You don't have to watch this, if you don't want to," as the teachers and other students stared at him in disbelief. Pride shook his head and simply stared at the screen with a dejected expression. Mina led the charge as the heroes entered the building, carefully and silently checking the ceilings and corners along the way. When they arrived at the bomb room, Gluttony attempted to jump and catch one of them off guard, but she had to avoid globs of glue and acid, and she had to roll out of the way before she was caught when the ground turned to something like mud. She attempted to dive through it into the floor below to regroup, but she was unable to do so quickly, and her ankle got caught. Mina touched the bomb, marking the hero's first victory to date, while Gluttony hung upside down below the room, looking dejected. As soon as they were all back, Pride turned to the teachers and said, "I think she's done for today," but Gluttony just held her close and rubbed her back rather than apologizing for his mistake. "Is that okay?" The next group of pupils took their place after the teachers nodded. "We'll prove it even more because we just showed that your sins aren't unbeatable," Tetsu and Kirishima said, pointing to Wrath. "We take on Wrath." Ojiro shook his head and palmed his face. "You all are fucked now," Wrath said, grinning broadly as he slammed his fist into his palm, causing a small explosion and some smoke. The other students started to perspire as he walked away, laughing heartily. Greed laughed after they left, saying, "My dragon had 10 pounds of mochi. He's going to screw up. I would call the recovery girl." Momo, Ida, and Kendo all turned pale. Kendo looked worriedly at Greed and said, "He's not going to kill them, right? Wrath won't take it that far, but there will be blood, and maybe some cracked or broken bones," Pride said, rolling his eyes as he continued to console Gluttony. "Those three most likely have the best chance out of all of us of winning," Momo said. Sloth sighed as the sins burst out laughing, of being able to walk afterwards. Kirishima grinned, "So you decided to fight us straight up." The round started with Wrath waiting for the heroes on the first floor, just like Sloth did. As soon as they entered, Wrath stood and stretched, revealing his gauntlets were gone. "Bro, I knew you were a man." Wrath simply gestured for the heroes to approach him, and they did. Ojiro, who was the fastest, arrived first and attempted to perform a front somersault in the air so that his tail would land on Wrath's head like a hammer blow, but Wrath blocked it with his arms in an X formation. This allowed Tetsu and Kirishima to slam twin punches into his exposed stomach and knock him back, but Wrath's smile only grew. Wrath used his hands to adjust himself and ended up crouching, dragon of shot. Tetsu and Kirishima attempted to block the attack by fully activating their quirks, but Wrath blew through them, leaving them cracked and tossed aside. They were able to cut the power enough that Wrath had to catch himself on his feet, but a second blast from his feet threw him toward Ojiro, who caught a palm strike of smaller explosions to the gut, burning away his costume and slamming him back first into a wall. Wrath huffed and turned back toward the recovering tanks, hammering into them with punch after punch until he leapt back, bringing his feet up right under their chins hard enough to lift them off the ground before falling to the ground unconscious. Wrath looked at the camera before letting out a roar of victory that left Greed a blushing mess. After Wrath had carried all three of his opponents back to the observation room to rest, Greed leapt at him and kissed him. Wrath just held on tight and kissed him back until one of the teachers cleared their throat and was flipped off by the two, at which point they parted ways with a grumble. Kendo, Rin, and Shota were next, and they selected Greed. Greed took a deep breath and strode out, while Wrath laughed darkly and said, "Bad move challenging my fox right after I fight. She won't hold back now that she's all hot and bothered." With a proud expression, he said, "I swear, I'll never understand you two." "Don't worry, kitty cat, it's just how they flirt," Gluttony said, planting a tiny kiss on Pride's cheek that caused him to gaze down into her golden eyes. "Would it bother you if?" Pride simply grinned and extended his hand, and Gluttony instantly sank her teeth into it and began to mutter softly. Wrath snorted, "You say shit like that about us, and then pull this crap. Talk about glass houses." Pride simply flipped him off as he continued to let Gluttony suckle on his arm while petting her head with his other hand. The teachers and other students appeared disturbed. Kendo tried to enter through a back window in silence, but Rin and Shota tried a new tactic and came in loudly through the front door. When Kendo crawled into the building, Greed grabbed her by the face and pushed her back, proving that this was a mistake. Kendo slammed into the ground, cratering it even though the fall was only a few feet. Greed was simply waving, "Just wait here for a second, I just need to finish the rest of your team." Shota touched Rin's side without realizing what had happened as the Chinese boy set up some of his scales. Greed was sitting and waiting for them when they arrived at the first flight of stairs, and they weren't silent. Rin began hurling scales like knives right away, but Greed was unable to avoid them before they exploded when they struck the stairs behind her. Greed developed a maniacal smile and, Rather than avoiding, concentrated on catching as many scales as she could before hurling them back at Rin, who shoved Shota away and was splattered with exploding scales. "Come on, class rep, we can't hold her off for much longer," Shota said into his earphone while adopting a defensive boxing stance. Greed simply chuckled and said, "Oh, so that was your plan. Sorry, but she's already out. Has been from the start." Greed mirrored Shota's stance as she approached, but when Shota attempted to jab, Greed turned and assumed her true stance, grabbing and flipping the boy. She added her quirk right before Shota hit the ground, creating a second crater, much like Kendo did. Greed put an end to her eccentricity and assisted her rivals in limping back to the observation room by calling the round. The other students were giving Greed a lot of sidelong glances when they got there, and Pride moaned, "They think you cheated. How else did she catch Kendo-san like that?" Ida scoffed. Greed grumbled, "It's simple, every other team has entered through the front. That's why I was watching the back." The rest of them blinked in disbelief, and she, "Despite how much you're proving me wrong right now, I don't think any of you are stupid, especially not Yaoyorozu-san or Kendo-san. I knew eventually someone would try to split up to catch us off guard, and I was prepared for it. Think about it, after failing that many times, one of you would try something different eventually, even if splitting up can be a coin flip in the best circumstances. Either it works, or you get picked off like what just happened. It was smart to try to play the range game against me, but I train with much more powerful explosions, and if you think that's the first time I've had to dodge knives, you're wrong. You stole the mochi I made special for Pride," pouted Gluttony. With a smile on her face and her tongue protruding, Greed said, "And they were worth getting 12 stitches." When Sloth started to move toward a new building, Momo, Ida, and Shizaki scowled and pointed at him, breaking up their argument. The three of them split up when the round began. On one side of the building, Shizaki climbed using her vines, and on the other, Momo made climbing equipment to accomplish a similar feat. Ida called out over his comms as he ran, checking as many rooms as he could on each floor. "Fourth floor, third room on the right, can you confirm?" Shizaki asked as he was clearing the third floor. Ida nodded and said, "I'll be right," but he froze when Sloth emerged from the darkness and grabbed Ida's earpiece from the boy who was not responding. Sloth moaned in Ida's voice, "He's on the third floor. Center room with the bomb. I'm engaging, but he's more agile than expected." After getting 2 affirmations, he parkoured up the hallway wall outside the room. After waiting for both girls to enter, he collapsed on top of them and used the capture tape to bind their wrists together, ending the round. As they made their way back to the observation room, Shizaki was muttering prayers of forgiveness, Momo was embarrassed, and Ida was irritated. Sloth was just curled up next to Envy and spoke his eyes shut. "Don't take anything that just happened personally. You very nearly beat me. If it were anyone else, or even me a month ago, you would have won. You did everything right. Dividing to force your opponent to split their attention is solid. You each used your quirks in reasonable ways and to maximize your chances of success. If I was even a moment slower on my takedown or you were a hair quicker to recover, you would have won." With a nod and a sigh, the three decided to train even harder going forward. Despite appearing anxious, Toru, Shoji, and Jiro selected Lust as their opponent. Lust gave Jiro a quick wink before she walked off, leaving the punk rocker in a strawberry-like state. As soon as the round started, there was a high-pitched sound that made Sins and the students shudder. In the meantime, Shoji had to cut off all of his ears, and Jiro was knocked to her knees. Shoji put Jiro on his back and secured her with 2 of his extra arms to keep her safe. Toru, meanwhile, took off her gloves and vanished entirely. Shoji had no choice but to look for the bomb or whatever was causing the loud whine. Rather, he discovered Lust grinning while wearing a pair of headphones that she had fashioned herself. Lust suddenly launched an assault, slamming her body parts into any available space. Shoji tried his hardest, but it was like battling a swarm of bees. Each blow didn't hurt much, but it got worse over time, especially after Lust was able to jab him in the side, punch him in the stomach, or poke him in the eye. However, Shoji refused to give up and persisted in trying to get to the rest of Lust's body. Eventually, the noise stopped, and All Might proclaimed another heroic victory. "I'm so sorry. The white noise generator wasn't supposed to be that strong. I built it to disable, not incapacitate." Lust bowed her head and sniffled as the 4 returned to find Jiro with some dried blood on her ears and Shoji with numerous small bruises. "I'm so sorry." Reaching over to stroke her head, Shoji said, "I forgive you. It was training after all." Jiro gave him a shoulder bump and said, I'll forgive you too, but do you think you could help me with my gear? If you can make something like that out of scraps, I'd love to see what you can do with real gear. Lust gazed up at him with grateful eyes. Jiro blushed and averted her gaze, but Lust took her hand and grinned, saying, Yeah, sure, anything you want. I promise I'll make it up to you. After everyone had settled in, Pony, Manga, and Awase confronted Greed, who appeared shocked but dismissed it. The hero team exchanged a nervous look as they heard a lot of noise coming from inside the building before the game could begin. Then, as All Might signaled to start, there was silence. Now deeply alarmed, Pony and her group crept forward to try to ascertain what was happening. They froze when they peered inside and saw that the first 2 floors were all in pieces on the ground. The building would not collapse because the support columns were still there, but everything else was destroyed. Speaking of which, Greed was waiting with her legs swinging on a small roost she had left where the 2nd floor once stood. Greed slammed her palms to the floor and debris started to float around the room as she saw them enter. Greed shoved herself off her perch and floated down slowly while grinning. Welcome to my playpen. Let's play a game. She then gave herself a chest pad and started moonbouncing around the room, kicking and launching debris chunks while adding more floating ammunition each time her hands made contact with the floor. In the meantime, Pony had to use all of her strength to avoid the debris and meteors that were hurtling toward her head. Awase had to hurry over to weld it back together when they were hit because he was afraid of being crushed, and Manga had to be careful with his quirk to avoid breaking any of the support columns. Greed laughed like a child in a bounce house the entire time. Wrath thought it was adorable, but anyone who wasn't a Sin would find it extremely unsettling. Awase eventually succeeded in welding together a mobile half-shell that was large enough for the team to conceal themselves behind. As the falling debris sounded like hail hitting a shell, Pony managed to concentrate long enough to begin blaring her horns at Greed, while Manga let out pows, whooshes, and fumes. In quick blows and bursts of fire and wind. When All Might called the game and reminded everyone of the 20-minute time limit, everyone was taken aback. Greed moaned as everyone returned to the observation room, saying, That was fun and all, but I think we got a bit off point after a while. And whose fault was that? Moaned Aizawa. Greed sighed, Fair, but come on, in a real fight the villain would have won almost immediately. I had them pinned and I could have crushed them and flown off at any time. I had a window prepared and everything. To borrow an old meme, rocks fall everybody dies, except me. I give them credit for holding out, but realistically in that situation you should have retreated and called for backup. Like Erasure over here to cancel my quirk, or Asui to counter my agility. You did the best you could, but unless one of you can fly, you didn't really stand a chance. Not your fault though, it was just a bad matchup. All of the Sins nodded when Vlad said, Actually since they challenged you, it was their fault, but that's why we're running this test. Situational awareness and being able to properly assess an enemy's potential can be the difference between victory and death. Where do you think you're going? They haven't picked an opponent yet, Aizawa said as Envy turned to head for the door after Shiro, Sato, and Sen moved forward. Envy chuckled. They were going to challenge me. Look at the pattern, the only Sins that haven't had a second fight yet are me, Wrath, and Pride, and I can't blame them. I wouldn't want to challenge 2 of the hardest hitting people in Japan either. I was shocked that anyone had the balls to challenge Wrath the first time. My name may be Envy, but I don't envy the ass kicking they'd receive if they tried. Envy waved goodbye and laughed. Sen shrugged and said, He's not wrong. Taking his teammates by the arms, he began to walk them out, leaving the class in confusion and a few Sins laughing. Shiro and Sato blinked. The 3 boys wanted to give the UA students one final victory because this was the final round before Pride's, but as soon as they stormed into the building, they saw Envy rolling up his sleeves and hanging up his coat in a menacing manner. Welcome heroes. As the last warm-up act before this competition hits its crescendo, I believe I should put on a show. I am the Serpent Sin of Envy, and it is time for this snake to dance. He bowed again, his arms extended, and they saw tiny pipes coming from his calves as he bounded forward. Ida was a spluttering, chopping mess up in the observation room, trying to figure out when Envy might have touched him. Sato attempted to stop the inevitable rush by pushing his teammates behind him, but Envy was unsuccessful and ended up uppercutting the bigger boy in the chin. It didn't do much harm, but that wasn't the intention. Envy flipped his back, grabbed some sugar cubes from his pocket, and charged forward once more, delivering a powerful blow to Sen's abdomen. Envy grabbed Sen's bare wrist in the process and threw him at Sato. Envy simply carried on with his dance, and changed his position when Zero attempted to bind him with tape. Envy laughed and kicked Sugar Rush off the wall before yelling, "Spiral Dragunov," and using gyrate to turn his right arm into a drill. Before the tape boy slammed into the wall, Zero caught the punch center mass and heard the clear sound of cracking ribs. Envy approached Zero and gave him a pat on the arm while still laughing. When Sato eventually got out from under Sen, he bulked up and rushed Envy while shooting back a whole tube of cake icing. Envy got ready to complete the round by removing a piece of tape from his elbow. Envy slid between Sato's legs as he hurried by, tripped the big teenager, and quickly tied him up like a bucking bull with lengths of tape that resembled ropes. Envy glanced at his handiwork and saw Sen clutching his stomach and Zero still slumped where he had left him. Envy was proclaimed the winner and bowed to the camera. All four of them returned, albeit a little worse for wear but still able to walk, though it took them a little longer than in previous rounds. There wasn't much to talk about. Simply put, Sato, Sen, and Zero were all overwhelmed, and this could only be fixed with experience and training. Pride reassured the three of them that the Sins weren't hiding despite their depression. They could easily make arrangements to participate in training if they so desired. Wrath was yelling and shaking Envy at the same time, telling him that he didn't care if he stole his moves, but he had better fucking do them correctly, and that punch had been incredibly sloppy. Grabbing him by the shoulders, Wrath demonstrated how to properly insert his shoulder into it. Pride said, "It's time to end this for today. It's almost noon, and my family is getting hungry. As such, I will up the challenge. Lust, directions please." Pride then stood up and cracked his back. Pride nodded and turned to leave after Lust said, "There's an airstrip 3 blocks to the right as you leave this building, it should suffice." Frowning, Aizawa said, "Explain." Grumbled, "He's choosing a different battlefield. Inside a confined space like a building not even All Might can hope to stop Pride. He's too strong, and there wouldn't be enough room for anyone to dodge him. All that would happen is a crushing quick defeat for your students, or the destruction of a city block while they try to stay alive. That's not the kind of training you're looking for, so he's going to perform one of our training routines." "And that is?" Vlad snarled. Snorting, Wrath said, "We call it the Hell Walk." Todoroki and Kamikiri scoffed and walked out of the room. Both of them were confident they could thoroughly defeat this arrogant blow and establish their superiority. Pride was standing in front of the fictitious bomb down the runway when they arrived at the designated spot. "Welcome to the Hell Walk. You are free to do anything and everything you can think of to reach this bomb. I will not move. I will not fight. It is that simple." Pride was able to be heard by everyone over the microphones and earbuds after he tapped the side of his head twice, activating Lust's equipment. As promised, Pride stood motionless with his arms crossed while the two students snarled, feeling as though they were being disrespected. With giddy excitement and broad smiles, the other Sins observed. "Distance?" inquired Wrath. Lust laughed. 2.5 kilometers, but neither side is starting at the edges, so I'd say a clean 2. I give them a kilometer. I'll ante, 1 mission, your choice. Gluttony sneered, "You're giving them too much credit, 500 meters. 1.5 kilometers, grinned Wrath, "I want to see them burn." "You said this was a training routine. Has anyone passed?" Aizawa asked after the students exchanged glances. Wrath holds the record at 100 meters, and it took him a week to recover after. He nearly turned into charcoal. The Sins chuckled as they exchanged glances. When the teachers finally realized what was going to happen, they attempted to stop the match, but neither of the teenagers paid attention. After a few feet, they could feel the edge of the heat that Pride was radiating as they charged ahead. After just 500 meters, Kamikiri's clothes began to burn and smoke as he gritted his teeth and continued to push. The heat increased with each step. To combat the heat, Todoroki formed a cone of ice in front of him. Kamikiri was crawling by the 1 kilometer mark, his face drenched in perspiration and his skin already severely sunburned. Todoroki's ice was melting more quickly than he could keep it going, and the only thing keeping him afloat was his innate ability to withstand heat. Pride just watched as the ground below him turned to black glass in spite of this. Kamikiri was unable to go on. Even Shoto's head became heavy and hazy after 200 meters, and he was on his knees, glaring at Pride with hatred. After he fell a few feet later, Pride sighed and turned off the heat. "It's over. Send over recovery girl, I know you have her on standby." Pride turned to face the sun and said, "They did well. They should be proud. though I suppose pride was their weakness in the end. Pride did not go back to the observation room. Rather, he raised the bomb and started to move it to the location where it was kept when not in use. A great deal of work needed to be done.
So this was it for the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.